Chapter 1. The Broken Princess. The city of Azirian, a monument of glittering marble and glistening spires, sprawled across the landscape like a crown atop a world untouched by the ravages of time. It was a world where technology had long since surpassed that of the human race, a place where every corner of the city pulsed with energy. Yet beneath its brilliance, a darkness had begun to take root, and it was not in the streets or among the people that this darkness festered. It was within the very heart of the royal family. Princess Nyara had once been the jewel of Azirian, beloved by all who beheld her. Her golden hair, her eyes that shimmered like twin moons, and her voice that could soothe the most restless of hearts had made her an object of adoration. She had been destined to rule by her husband's side, the Prince Terith, who was hailed as a leader capable of ushering in a new era for their people. Together, they would have brought peace to the galaxy, and the entire empire had spoken of their love as a shining example to be followed. But those days, like the sun sinking beneath the horizon, had long passed. Nyara had never been one to succumb easily to the whispers of vanity that seemed to plague those around her. She had always been aware of her beauty, but it had never been the most important thing to her. Her beauty had been her gift, but it had not defined her. She had prided herself on her intellect, her strength, and her vision for a future where the Azirian Empire would not only rule the stars, but bring peace to the endless galaxies surrounding them. Her husband, Terith, had promised to support her, and together they had planned to conquer the unknown, to unite races, to fight injustice. But things had changed. It started subtly at first, a glance here, a comment there. Terith's eyes began to linger on other women, those with the pale skin and delicate features that were considered beautiful by Azirian's strict standards. Nyara, with her unique appearance, with her strength of character and resolve, began to be seen less as a partner and more as an inconvenience. Her scars, remnants of a life before her marriage, had only served to mark her as different. Her eyes, once admired for their color and depth, had now become the subject of ridicule and judgment. They said they were too large for a princess, too haunting for a queen. Her skin, once radiant, was now criticized for being too coarse. No longer did she hold the place in Terith's heart that she once did. The truth was undeniable: her beauty was fading, not in the sense that time had stolen it, but that Terith had stopped looking at her the way he once had. Her presence no longer captivated him. Her body had changed, but it was not the shape or the size of her that had caused his betrayal. It was the power she wielded, the independence that she had shown him, the ambition that made her shine even in his shadow. His pride could not allow her to be greater than him, not in any way. And so, it happened, as cruel as it was, as devastating as it would seem to any who would hear it. Prince Terith had abandoned her, not just emotionally, but physically as well. One day, as she waited in their private chambers, a message arrived for her, a cold, heartless message that stripped away her status, her dignity, and her future. "I have found someone else," it had read. "Someone who understands me better. You are no longer needed. You will be left in the care of my advisors. They will decide your fate." There had been no preparation for the reality that came next. Nyara was cast aside, discarded as though she were nothing more than an old relic. Her servants had abandoned her, her friends had turned away in fear, and the palace's grand walls, once filled with laughter and light, now echoed only with the haunting silence of a woman forgotten. But Nyara, in her anguish, did not give up. She refused to let Terith's rejection define her. She tried to hold on to the hope that one day, anyone would come to her aid. But that hope quickly turned to despair, and soon, the only thing that kept her going was the thought of revenge. Revenge, not just for her own humiliation, but for the empire that had once adored her and now mourned her fall. It was during the darkest hours of her imprisonment that a new, unexpected turn of events took place. From the stars, a human scavenger, an outsider appeared. He had come to Azirian on a mission that had nothing to do with her, a mission to retrieve artifacts from a forgotten world. His ship was old, a relic of humanity's long-lost past, and his name, Alex Caldwell, was not one that any of the Azirian nobility would have recognized. He had no reason to come to her rescue. He had no obligation to even acknowledge her existence. And yet, when he stumbled upon her in that forsaken cell, abandoned and ignored, He saw something that no one else had seen in years her worth. Alex Caldwell wasn't the type of person to look at someone like Nyara and feel pity, but there was something about her that struck him. Maybe it was the fire that still burned in her eyes, or the defiance in her posture, the subtle strength that came from the depths of her suffering. There was something in her that reminded him of his own struggles, his own journey across the stars. She wasn't just a princess. She was a woman, lost but still holding on to something. Something far more valuable than the surface beauty that had once made her a queen. He was drawn to her in a way that he couldn't explain, something more profound than simple attraction. It was something akin to a rescue mission, but it wasn't one he had planned. He didn't come to save her. He came to survive. But in the end, saving her became his purpose. And so, he did what no one else had done. He freed her. But freedom came at a cost, one that neither Nyara nor Alex could have anticipated. For the moment he pulled her out of that cell and into the dusty, forgotten hallways of the palace, he unknowingly set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the fate of not just the Azirian Empire, but the fate of countless other civilizations across the galaxy. Nyara's first breath of freedom came not in a blaze of glory, but in a quiet, trembling exhale as she stepped away from the cold, dark stone walls of her prison. The echo of her chains, now removed, still seemed to reverberate in the hollow space of her mind, a constant reminder of the shackles she had worn, both physical and emotional. The palace, once her home, now felt like a foreign place, its pristine corridors and towering halls serving as a graveyard of memories that would never again hold meaning. The gold and marble, once symbols of her status, now seemed so distant, so unimportant in the face of the reality that she had been discarded, forgotten, left to rot. And yet, as she followed Alex Caldwell down the dimly lit passage, something in her shifted. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she dared to hope again. She had no idea who this man was or why he had risked everything to free her, but the sheer fact that anyone had seen her worth beyond the facade of her title was enough to ignite a flicker of defiance within her. This stranger, this human, had given her a chance of a lifetime, not just for survival, but for something greater. The door to the outer world swung open, revealing a sky heavy with clouds, the wind carrying a sharp tang of ozone from a nearby storm. Alex didn't say much as he led her toward his ship, a rusted hulk of metal and outdated technology, its sleek exterior a sharp contrast to the towering palace. The ship was nothing grand, certainly nothing like the luxurious vessels of the Azirian Empire. Yet, in its simplicity, it felt like freedom. It was a place where she could breathe without judgment, a vessel where her past didn't matter. As they reached the ramp, Nyara paused, taking one last look at the palace behind her. Its towering walls seemed so insignificant now, a relic of a life that no longer existed. She was no longer the princess, the perfect royal consort. She was simply a woman, vulnerable but alive, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she didn't have to hide who she was. "Are you coming?" Alex's voice broke through her reverie, his tone gruff but kind. She didn't answer immediately, her mind still racing with thoughts of the life she had left behind. But when her gaze met his, she saw something in his eyes, something that wasn't pity, wasn't weakness. It was determination. "I'm coming," she whispered, her voice steadying as she stepped onto the ramp. Chapter 2, A New Beginning. The interior of the ship was far less opulent than the Grand Palace, but Nyara quickly learned that there was a certain charm in the simplicity of it. There was a worn familiarity to the cockpit, with its mismatched chairs and aging control panels. Everything had a purpose. Everything had seen its fair share of wear and tear. There was no room for vanity here, no pretense of perfection. Here, everything was just as it needed to be: functional, raw, and alive. Alex had already strapped himself into the pilot's seat, his hands moving expertly over the controls, coaxing the ancient ship to life. Nyara settled into the seat next to him, feeling the hum of the engines beneath her as the ship began to rise, leaving the gravity of Azirian behind. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of the ship's movements lull her into a state of calm. The weight of everything she had lost, everything she had endured, seemed to meld away in the solitude of space. There was no one to judge her here, no one to remind her of what she had once been. There was only the cold expanse of the galaxy and the promise of something new. Where are we headed? She asked after a long silence, her voice quieter than usual. Alex glanced at her, his face unreadable for a moment before he spoke. I don't know yet. Just trying to get out of range of Azirian's sensors for now. There's a lot of people who would want to see you back there, and they don't want to hear the truth. But the thing about being free is that you don't have to go back. Nyara nodded, feeling an unfamiliar surge of something warm in her chest. Freedom. It felt foreign, like a word she had only ever read in books or heard spoken by those who had never known what it truly meant to be imprisoned. For so long, she had been nothing more than a pawn in a royal game, a tool used to cement alliances, to preserve an image of power and beauty. But now, as she sat beside Alex, staring out at the stars that stretched before them, she realized that freedom wasn't just about escaping. It was about choosing who you were, choosing your path without the expectations of others dictating your every step. Alex's voice broke her from her thoughts once again. You know, I didn't come to Azirian for you. I came for an artifact, something that's been lost for centuries. But I guess I wasn't expecting to find a princess in the middle of a prison. It's a funny thing, isn't it? Nyara turned to look at him, her brow furrowing. What do you mean? He chuckled softly, his eyes softening as he glanced out at the stars. I mean, people are always looking for things that are valuable, things that are shiny and pretty. But sometimes, the real treasures are hidden beneath the surface. I've learned that the hard way. Nyara felt a flicker of understanding. She had spent so many years trying to live up to an image of perfection, trying to fit the mold that had been cast for her. And in doing so, she had lost herself. She had been shiny and polished, but beneath the surface, she had always been more. Perhaps that was why Alex had seen something in her that no one else had. Not her beauty, not her title, but her strength, her resilience, the fire that still burned deep within. I suppose we're both looking for something then, she said, her voice steady as she looked out at the vast emptiness before them. Alex didn't answer immediately, but his eyes flicked to her once more. Yeah, he finally said. Maybe we are. As the ship drifted further into the unknown, Nyara knew that her journey had only just begun. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in her life, she felt a sense of purpose, one that was entirely her own. The Azirian Empire, her former life, would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. What lay ahead, what she would choose for herself, was her own to decide. And with Alex Caldwell by her side, perhaps she could find the strength to reclaim everything she had once lost. The stars outside the ship's viewport drifted by in a steady stream of lights and shadows, each one a distant world, a mystery that begged to be explored. For Nyara, it was as if the universe itself had opened its arms to her, offering a new chapter in her life. The hum of the engines beneath her was comforting, a steady reminder that she was moving, that she was leaving behind the life of a princess, one defined by her beauty, by her marriage, by expectations, and embracing the unknown. Alex's ship wasn't much to look at, certainly not a vessel fit for royalty. The control panel was a mess of old switches and dials, the seats worn with time, but to Nyara, it was perfect. It was a symbol of freedom. It was a place where no one cared about the appearance of their passengers, where the only thing that mattered was survival, and perhaps something deeper, the choice of who they wanted to become. As the hours passed, Nyara found herself speaking more. At first, her words were cautious, like a bird learning to fly again after being kept in a cage for too long. But with Alex's quiet encouragement, she spoke of her life, her childhood on Azirian, her hopes for the future, the dreams that had once felt so real, so achievable. She told him of her ambitions, of the things she had once wanted to change in her empire, the people she had wanted to help, the walls she had hoped to break down. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke, and though the words were laced with the sorrow of what had been taken from her, they also carried with them a sense of purpose. Alex listened quietly, never interrupting, never offering judgment. He simply nodded in understanding as the ship carried them deeper into the stars. As she spoke, she realized that, for the first time in years, she wasn't pretending. She wasn't trying to fit into a role that had been thrust upon her. She was simply herself, raw, honest, and vulnerable. And in that moment, she felt more powerful than she ever had before. It's strange, she said after a long pause, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I would feel angry. Angry at the betrayal, at the people who turned their backs on me. But now I just feel free. I thought I had to be someone I wasn't. And now that I'm not that person anymore, I'm finally starting to understand who I really am. Alex glanced over at her, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Freedom does that to you, he said. It's a gift, but it also comes with the weight of knowing that you're the one who gets to decide what comes next. No one else is going to tell you who to be. That's the power you've always had, you just had to find it again. Nyara felt a strange warmth spread through her chest at his words. It was not a warmth of romantic affection, but something deeper, something more profound, a sense of understanding, of kinship, of being seen not as a princess or an object of pity, but as a person, a real person with dreams, desires, and the ability to shape her own destiny. She smiled softly, the first real smile she had given since her fall from grace. Chapter 3: A Path Forward. The first few days aboard Alex's ship were spent in relative silence, the vastness of space outside becoming a familiar backdrop to their conversations. Alex had his own stories to share, tales of his life as a scavenger and mechanic, his travels to distant planets, the odd jobs he had taken to keep himself afloat. He wasn't the type to boast, but Nyara could tell that his life had been one of constant struggle. Unlike her, Alex had never been part of an empire, never known the luxury of a throne or the pressure of a title. He was just a man, one who had learned to survive on his own terms. And in that, Nyara found something admirable. She wasn't used to men like him, men who weren't born into greatness, who didn't rely on their titles to define them. Alex was self-made, and his confidence didn't come from wealth or power. It came from his ability to fix things, to solve problems, and to keep moving forward no matter the odds. As they passed through asteroid fields and avoided the occasional pirate ship, Nyara began to feel the weight of her new reality settle in. She was no longer bound by the expectations of the Azirian Empire, no longer a pawn in a political game. But that freedom came with a price. The past couldn't be erased, and the empire that had once been her world was still out there, still watching. Though she no longer wore the crown, the Azirian court would never forget the princess they had discarded so ruthlessly. And though her heart had been broken, her mind was clear now. She had a responsibility to herself, to her people, to rebuild. Not just as a ruler, but as a leader who had learned the true meaning of strength. One evening, as the ship coasted through the edge of a nebula, its glowing clouds illuminating the space around them in surreal colors, Alex turned to her with a question. "So, what's next?" he asked, his eyes focused on the controls, but his voice steady. "I mean, you've got this whole new freedom. What do you want to do with it?" Nyara stared out at the nebula, the swirling colors mesmerizing her. She didn't answer right away, as if she needed to hear the question again in her mind, to let it settle in her soul. What did she want to do with her life now? The question echoed in her mind, and for the first time in years, she realized there were no limits. No walls. She could be anyone. She could do anything. "I don't know yet," she said quietly, her voice full of possibility. "But I want to help. I want to do something that matters, not just for me, but for everyone. I think there's a chance to rebuild, to bring peace to the galaxy. But it can't be done alone. I need to learn. I need to find others who believe in something more." Alex watched her closely, his gaze thoughtful. "You're right. You can't do it alone. But the first step is finding out who you really are. And then, the rest of it, what you want to change, who you want to become, it'll all come after that." Nyara nodded, feeling a sense of clarity that she hadn't known in years. The path ahead was uncertain, yes, but she was no longer afraid. She had Alex by her side, and more importantly, she had herself. The road to redemption would be long, and the challenges would be immense. But for the first time in a long time, Nyara felt ready to face it. Not as the discarded princess of Azirian, but as something far more powerful, a woman with a mission. As the days stretched into weeks, Nyara found herself immersed in the rhythm of life aboard Alex's ship. With each passing day, the vastness of space no longer felt like a void, but an opportunity. The silence, once oppressive, had become a space for contemplation, a canvas for new beginnings. Alex, for all his gruffness, had become more than just a rescuer. He had become a companion, a guide in this strange new world she had stepped into. His wisdom, born of survival, was something Nyara admired, though she rarely voiced it. They encountered numerous planets along their journey, some uninhabited, some teeming with strange life forms. Each stop provided Nyara with new knowledge, new perspectives. She learned to navigate the ship's controls, though she often left the more complex tasks to Alex. She spent her time reading through ancient texts, ones Alex had gathered during his years as a scavenger, and listening to the stories of the planets they passed. Slowly but surely, the bitterness of her past began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. Her future, which had once seemed uncertain, was now within her grasp. She would not let it slip away. On one particular evening, as they passed a small, uncharted planet, Alex broke their usual routine. "We're going to land here for a bit," he said, his eyes focused on a small dot on the navigation screen. Nyara raised an eyebrow. "What's there?" "Not sure. Just a rumor I heard. Something that might help us. And, well, I've got a feeling it's something you might want to see." Nyara tilted her head, intrigued but cautious. She had learned to trust Alex, but still, her mind wandered to the possibilities. A part of her wondered if this was just another distraction, another piece of the puzzle she had yet to solve. But she felt the pull of adventure, the desire to see and learn more. "All right," she said, standing from her seat. "Let's see what this is all about." The ship descended into the planet's atmosphere, its engines humming as they broke through the dense cloud cover. The landscape that greeted them was unlike anything Nyara had seen before. It was a barren desert world, vast stretches of sand dunes stretching to the horizon, broken only by the occasional jagged rock formation. The air was dry and thin, but the sun, hanging low in the sky, bathed everything in a warm, golden glow. As the ship touched down on the dry ground, Nyara felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that accompanied every new experience. She had spent so many years within the confines of the palace, never venturing far from the walls that had once defined her existence. Now, every new world was a chance to explore who she was, who she could be. Alex led the way as they disembarked, the harsh wind stinging their faces as they trudged across the sand. They soon came upon a small, abandoned settlement, once a thriving colony, it seemed, now deserted and overrun by the elements. Rusted machinery and broken structures dotted the landscape, but in the distance, one structure stood tall and intact, almost like a beacon in the desolate wilderness. "That's where we're heading," Alex said, pointing toward the structure. Nyara's curiosity grew with every step, the sight of this forgotten place stirring something inside her. It was as though it represented everything she had been forced to leave behind, everything she had lost. But now, standing at the edge of this ancient colony, she felt something else rising within her, a desire to reclaim what was hers, to take back the power that had been stolen. The princess may have been gone, but the woman who had always lived in the shadows of her title was finally emerging. They reached the structure, and as they approached, Alex began fiddling with a control panel that had been buried beneath layers of sand. The machinery sputtered to life, its systems clicking and whirring as ancient technology awoke from its long slumber. The large metal door creaked open, revealing a dark corridor within. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the smell of age and decay heavy in the atmosphere. But despite the disrepair, Nyara could feel the weight of something significant within this place. This was no ordinary building. It felt like a library of forgotten knowledge, a relic of a time long past. As they moved deeper into the facility, they came across a room filled with consoles and screens, most of them flickering with static or dead, but others still holding on to their final sparks of life. "This is what I was hoping for," Alex said, pulling up a display screen. The data was incomplete, but it was enough for him to work with. This place was once part of a network that connected the ancient civilizations of the galaxy. "There's a lot of lost tech here, things that could help us. Things that could help you." Nyara stepped closer, her heart racing as she scanned the screen. It was a map, an old, ancient star map that connected dozens of planets, many of them long forgotten. But one in particular caught her attention, Azirian. It wasn't just a map. It was a key to the secrets of the galaxy, to the ancient civilizations that had once shaped its destiny. "This is it," she said quietly, her voice full of awe. "This is the key to everything." Chapter 4, The Return. The journey back to Azirian was long, but it was filled with purpose. With the ancient star map in hand and the knowledge Alex had uncovered, Nyara was no longer just a fugitive. She was a woman on a mission. The discoveries they had made in the forgotten settlement had changed everything. The galaxy was not what she had once been told. It was not a place ruled by powerful empires alone. It was a place of lost histories, ancient technology, and untold possibilities. As the ship entered the atmosphere of Azirian once again, Nyara felt her resolve harden. She had returned, but not as the princess who had been cast aside. She had returned as someone with the power to change not just her own fate, but the fate of those who had once abandoned her. Alex watched her closely, sensing the shift within her. He had known from the start that she was more than just a princess. He had seen the fire in her eyes when no one else had. And now, as they approached the palace that had once been her prison, he knew that she was ready to take back what was hers. "The galaxy won't know what hit it," he said, his voice full of conviction. Nyara smiled softly, her heart full of a strength she had never known. "No," she said, her voice steady and sure. "It won't." As the ship landed on the grounds of the Azirian palace, Nyara stood tall, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She was no longer the discarded princess. She was a woman who had reclaimed her destiny. And now, the empire that had once rejected her would have no choice but to recognize her power. The end of one story had marked the beginning of another, and Nyara knew that the galaxy would soon learn the true meaning of her name. The princess may have been gone, but the leader was just beginning.